When are you going to get back on a 400 and come ride with us slow people?
That's question. Now here's the answer, Jimmy.
When Ducati makes a 400, I'll get back on a 400. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it has Ducati plastics, maybe.
But my question is, I was here a couple weeks ago. We did the track walk together, and I know it's probably different for each track. But there's the optimum line around the track. So now, what do you do when you have to pass somebody, and you're just a little bit faster than them, right? You have to deviate from your line somewhere. Like, how do you make that choice?
Well, so there are zones on every racetrack where it's very one line, right? So like when I come through A, B, and 12, like 11, A, B, and 12, I know I'm probably not going to make a pass through there unless I'm on a much faster bike. Same with like 3A, B, C. Probably not going to make a pass through there unless there's a huge speed differential. But if I'm in like a race setting and I'm around, guys that are relatively close in speed to me, within a few tenths maybe, I'm thinking of big passing zones, like braking zones, like into turn 1. Even, setting up to where I can square off turn 2 and maybe pass into the braking of 3A. Again, this gets pretty one line here, but I might be setting up turn 4 so I can pass in turn 5. And then again, right, like this back stuff is so flowing, and when you're close in lap time, it's really difficult. So I try to basically, stay as close to them as possible and then set up turn 7 to where I can maybe get a run up the inside or even around the outside if I feel really strong there and my bike works well. I might even hook around the outside of 9 to get into 10. But for me, especially, like I've always been really strong on the brakes, so I'm looking at big braking zones like turn 5, maybe a little bit into 3A, and then turn 1. Okay. Yeah.
Even though you're going faster, you're still going to have to go off the line a little bit. You have to deter, because obviously the guy in front of you, unless they're making a mistake, they're going to be on your optimal line. So I think for me, a big thing has been like coaching and having to ride around people. I've had to go on different lines and, pass people, even riding track days, right? Like if I'm coming up on slower riders, I'm forced to pass people. Sometimes I pass a little bit too hard on the track day, but it's the same kind of thing, right? Like getting comfortable using, different parts of the racetrack. But that's kind of something that you don't really get the experience with unless you're in those situations more often and you put yourself in those situations. Like if I was trying to get faster at a track day, I'd go out with someone I know is relatively close in speed to me. And then I can kind of play around with, okay, well, maybe here will work, and studying, okay, I'm faster in this part, blah, 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 stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Any more questions there?
Not related to passing, but just vision-wise, how do you help, like, track your vision through, like, super long turns, like 8 and 10? Like, where do you find your eyes? Because I always find that I end up, like, looking down or at the inside curbing as I'm coming around, and then the second I pick my eyes up, it makes more sense, but like I have trouble. I get lost when I look out far.
Yeah, so like for me, especially when I come through turn 7, since it's such a fast corner and really hooks around, like as soon as I know I'm within like 3 feet of the apex, my head immediately goes straight to like the cone, like that big orange cone that was out by turn 8, and I'm looking in that general direction because I know if I'm looking there, I'm looking where I want to go. The bike will naturally follow where I'm looking. So that's why target fixating is a thing, right? Because where you look is where you're going to end up going. So for me, right, like when I come through 7, I'm looking all the way basically to 8 and 9. I find myself looking at even the tire marks, right? Like far up the road from me. So I know, okay, I'm on the right trajectory with my bike. I have the right direction. Even through like 10, right? That's another hard one because it's kind of up a hill. You can't see to the top. So for me there, right, like as soon as I flick it into this first part, which like we talked about yesterday, that's almost a double apex, I'm immediately looking to the end of where I can see, which is the end of the rumble strip, because I know by the time I get to the end of the rumble strip, I'm going to be having to flip the bike over again. So that's a reference for me as well.
Thank you.
Do you have any like tips and tricks for getting past the mental block like after a crash?
Yeah, for me, well, obviously at our level when we're racing and, we crash more than the average, track day rider or whatever. So it's easier for us to be like, all right, let's get back on the bike. But even for us, like me at a track day, right? Like that's, my dad and I, so we have the same things where we're the ones that have to work on the bike after and all that stuff where it's kind of more of a mental thing. So for me, if I crash at a track day, right, and I know, say it was in 3B, right, which is a really good crashing spot here. Yeah. I know. 5, but Yeah, exactly. I first assess my crash, and usually I know immediately what I did wrong. Say I tucked the front, right, and I know, okay, it was really early in the morning. Maybe I just, the lap before I wasn't pushing as fast, so my tire was a little bit more cold when I was coming to the side. So I assess my crash and I know what I did wrong. So now I'm just saying, well, let's not do that again because, let's just not do that again. And to build up the confidence again in that corner, for me, I give it like 3 laps, right? As soon as I get back out, okay, the first one I'm fine, second one I'm fine, third one I'm fine. Okay, well, I'll probably be fine as long as I don't do the same thing I did that time, right? So just for me, I've been a huge fan. I mean, obviously it's kind of like a rule of thumb in racing, but consistency. Like I know if I'm consistently doing what I know how to do, my consistent lines, my consistent brake points, brake pressure, everything, I know I will be okay. So it's really just about building that to where you don't make those mistakes as often.
Got it. Yeah. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Just in terms of like, particularly in being consistent, when like you're on a race day, like you have Friday practice, then you have Saturday, and sometimes like you'll see like you make a big step, like you'll go 2 seconds faster on the second day. But obviously when you're riding on the day before, like you're pretty much riding at close to your limit, I would assume, or right there. Like, what do you use to find time? Like outside of like really technical and mechanical setups, like is it condensing braking zones? Is it saying like, oh, maybe I need to carry more speed through this corner? Or is it like really line dependent? Like, oh, that was a bad line.
It's really track knowledge, right? Because your first day at a track, especially for us, right? Because a lot of us don't go to the racetracks until we race there. So, our first sessions are always us learning the tracks again and trying to build the consistency that we were talking about. And that just means, maybe it's a second or 2 slower than our fastest time all weekend, which would be the next day in our second qualifying. But going a little bit slower and, really understanding the track, especially for me when I raced in Europe, like a big thing was my first session, my first 5 laps, I'm going to go a lot slower than I feel like I should. But that's just to understand exactly where the track is, find my references, find that, and build the consistency from there. I don't build the consistency off of going 110% my first lap out, because that's how you make mistakes. If you do your first lap at a racetrack and you're finding yourself running wide immediately, that's not a great way to build consistency. So yeah, for us, we, aside from, like you said, setup and things that we change throughout the weekend, it's really just track knowledge and building that feeling with the track, because obviously, we go from West Coast to East Coast, so tracks are very different.
What would you notice the big difference between, let's say, these tracks here on the East Coast and, let's say, West Coast tracks, or even Europe?
Yeah, well, European tracks in general are just a lot more smoother for the most part. Obviously, that's not every single track, but the tracks that I had been to, which were on the World Superbike calendar, even the GP calendar, those are very smooth tracks, very technical, a lot of them. But here, East Coast, West Coast, it's kind of hit or miss. Like it really just depends on the type of grain and stuff that they use for the actual asphalt. Typically, when we go out west, it's a lot more abrasive, but it's like abrasive and not very grippy. So it'll tear your tire, but it feels like you don't have grip. Wow. And then we have tracks like this where it's freshly paved and it's very abrasive, and then it also tears your tire and it feels good. So it's elevation, stuff like that, yeah.
Do you have a favorite track?
Barber here, yeah. Barber's my favorite track.
Make sure you speak loud.
Turn 9. What's your fast line through there? Not being defensive. because we always have a conversation and we have different ways of coaching, and you can see the black line there, they shoot out. I was talking to Corey one time and he said hug tight. So what's your fast line through there?
Yeah, I come through turn 7, right? And I don't know whose line this is, but I'm just gonna go like this so I can, sorry. I come through here, right, and my apex is right about there. So what I'm focusing on is I'm setting up for turn 9. I want to be on the gas as hard as possible because you can actually make up a lot of time through this section. And in order to do that and still properly set up for turn 9, you have to hold it a little bit tighter. So for me, you know, when I come out of here, I use a little bit of the track, probably about midway through, but then I'm really accelerating and I stay about 2 feet, 1.5 feet off the track until I get to about here where that orange cone is, and I sit the bike up, downshift, and then immediately throw the bike back in to where I'm setting up for this next corner, right? So I stay tight, but I'm still about 1.5 feet off the inside of it.
You do stand the bike up because, like I said, we.
Just to get my downshift and not have lean angle when I'm braking hard.
If you go by and you see somebody's 0.1 behind you, do you do that or do you go defensive?
I do the same thing because
stay tight.
Well, I know that they're not going to outbrake me into this corner,
well, we
right?
know that, but that's you.
But that's what I'm saying. Even so, if you're still within, 1 or 2 feet off the inside and you get on the gas as hard as you can through that corner, you're not going to get stuffed up the inside. That's a really hard place, even in a race, to pass because it does get really tight and it narrows out. And if I see a wheel, I'm just going to close it because, I see they're not going to be able to go under me. I'm just going to shut the door.
Thank you.
Because of the double apex. They talk about the double apex, right?
Of turn 10.
As you're setting up, not
You're already set up. It's okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna give you the mic, so you're already.
Yeah, for turn 10, right, we talked about it kind of being a double apex there. Really, your only danger zone of being passed is from that transition of turn 9 to turn 10. The middle of the corner, people are generally the same speed, but sometimes you might have bikes like the Ducati doesn't like being on the edge all the way. So for me, when I go through there and I'm thinking about a race, I don't want to be too far off the inside because if I see an R6 behind me, he might be able to just keep it turning and I have to kind of make it a wider radius. So when I come in there, I'm really focusing on my drive. I'm going to stay a little bit tighter, maybe sacrifice a little bit of mid-corner speed, but I'm going to get on the gas as soon as possible and likely get a better drive when we get to the top of that crest.
So the double apex for 10 is to set up that exit.
Yeah.
So you can square off the exit into the get to
Yeah,
12.
I want to have my direction
Early.
by here, right? Instead of still turning and turning with it and having direction here, I want my direction 5 feet earlier, 10 feet earlier, so I can stand the bike up and be full throttle as soon as possible.
Are you finding, what did you have to change differently in your riding about learning where the power band is in the V2 or that twin and where the torque is?
Yeah, so when I was riding on the R6 is what I had before. That was a much more forgiving bike, right? Like I could really be on the side of the tire and start really laying into it, and it wasn't going to give me a big slide. But with the V2 and how rigid the chassis is and where the power is actually delivered, we have to stand the bikes up a lot sooner. So for us, it's more like riding like a bigger bike. And you can even see it if you watch some of the Moto America rounds with PJ and Skoltz, where PJ will have to get the bike in his direction a lot earlier while Skoltz can run the bike out more like a little bike. That's the biggest thing.
So you're kind of positioning and pointing the bike before you're hard on the gas.
You're more of a point and shoot with the
And if
Ducati.
you're not, do you feel like you're spinning a tire? You're just
Oh
not.
my gosh, yeah.
Okay.
You can't get any traction until you do that.
Back to turn 9. Is that cone a good reference point to let off the gas? Or are you trying to let off before that?
Maybe a little bit before that, maybe like 5 feet before that, but I know like that cone is a great reference for me because I will sit the bike up, get my downshift and throw it back in. It's relatively around there. With Moto America, right, we don't have the cones on the track, right? So for me, I usually look at those, it's two separated curbings, right? So I look at that separation as that zone as well, if you don't have that cone for a race weekend, yeah.
Back to 10. What's your preferred line? Hugging it tight or going out and then back?
Yeah, so for me, I come out of 9, right, and I hit the back side of this first curve, because if you kind of look at it, it's not necessarily this big kind of arc. It's a little bit pointed at that first part of it. So I hit the back side of that to where I'm not driving out too far, just hitting the back side, and I stay about 2 feet off the inside curbing, right? Like I'm accelerating, maintenance throttle through here, about mid-curbing, and then as soon as I get to about mid-corner, I'm starting to tighten it back up so I can start to get my direction, laying into the throttle more to help give me that direction, right? Because you're squatting into the chassis, and that'll help me turn the bike and spin the bike so that I have my direction early, right? So I'm almost touching the inside paint fully straight up and down because I have my direction so early at the end of this, right?
So let's say you're in a race and
Yeah.
you got a rider right on your tail.
Yeah.
Would you take that same line or would you hold it tight?
Like I said with the R6s, I might hold it even just a little bit tighter the last 2 laps of the race, but up until then, I would probably hold it a little bit, or stay about 2 feet off the inside. It's literally the last lap of the race, I will hold this entire thing on the curb because I do not want anyone coming under me. And I know with the V2, if I still have my direction and I can get my direction, I will be able to probably get out of this corner a little bit better. And I would even kind of hold it defensive through here, stay a little bit farther to the right side of the track before I hug it back left so that, especially if it's an R6, it can't go under me into this last corner.
So on the exit of 10, when are you getting like the full throttle?
My full throttle is
good help.
before the end of the curbing.
Oh yeah?
I'm all the way on the full throttle,
Really?
yeah.
So are you backing off going into 11A? Because I tried.
Not really.
It's like I can
Just
get my
maybe-
bike to
maybe-
transition like full throttle through there.
Maybe I'm like 90% throttle. Maybe through that first one, but everything else I'm full.
Oh yeah. Through 12.
Unless I have, yeah.
pin.
Through 12, I go maybe back to 70, and then I'm back to 100 again.
Okay, so.
Just to get the front end to pitch and turn.
Oh, so basically before the bridge, you like back off a little bit.
Just a little bit, but I'm never fully off the throttle. I just go from 100 to 70 and then back to 100.
Oh, okay.
I probably, if it was a race weekend and I needed to qualify, I would go full throttle, but it's not that right now.
Okay.
Turn 3. What's the best line on turn 3? A, B,
Yeah.
and C.
So I come out of, it starts really in 2, right? So I come out of 2, I make sure that I'm right by the curbing at the end of this kind of curb here from turn 2. That's also my braking point is at the end of that curbing. So I'm staying, I get to the end of it, I'm braking, I get my downshift, and as soon as that's done and the bike's settled, I'm throwing it into the corner. And I'm staying, like if you watch at all me go through here, I am like basically on the curb from 3A. And I'm as tight as I can be when I throw it in, right? And that's not immediate. You don't want to be hugging it too early to where now you're getting pushed out here. You want to make sure that when you throw the bike into the corner, you're kind of hitting your apex around here, right? So I get through there. I'm getting on the throttle. I'm not opening it up like this. There's no need to open it up like that because no matter what, when we get to the middle of 3B, we're all going the same speed. So for me, when I come out of 3A, right, I'm almost straight lining it to 3B. Not fully, but just a little bit, right? Enough for me to basically go, okay, I'm coming into 3A, throw the bike in, and I can see 3B coming up, and I make that transition on the throttle, and it's not as fast as 3B to 3C, that transition, right? Because it's kind of slower. You're not on the throttle as hard. So I'm keeping my throttle. I never let off the throttle from the exit of 3A to basically 4. I don't let off the throttle. It's not 100% the whole time, but I'm never letting off completely. So I come through 3A, get on the throttle, hug it just a little bit, but as soon as I get out of 3A, I'm almost cheating it a little bit to where when I get to 3C, my mid-corner of 3C might not be super fast, but I'm trying to basically make this a straight line, right? So I'm I'm doing that to where I could basically cheat a little bit here to where my exit is fast enough to where I'm hitting the end of the curbing. I'm not.
You go out in the grass right there?
I am in the grass.
Okay.
The whole time. No, but I have hit the grass through there because I'm running out of that curb. I'm not running to so like when I exit here, my goal is always to just hit the end of that curb, because if I come out too early, I know I didn't set up enough or I got on the gas too hard too early. And that's one of those corners where, being a little bit slower in the mid to gain on your exit is really important, because look, we're going up a hill, right? And this is another straightaway. And that's why this is important. When we come out of turn 5, that's super important. Even from 6 to 7 is pretty important. And then from 10 all the way to turn 1, that's a straightaway. So making sure we lengthen those zones from full throttle is really important.
What's your favorite part of a race weekend? What do you enjoy the most of an entire
Yeah, the podium.
Well, podium obviously, but
the wheelies on the cool-off lap.
The aspect of the actual racing. What part of it is your highlight?
It kind of depends if I'm having a good weekend or not. Really, like I've said it before a couple of times this year, if we have a good Friday, I know we're going to have a good weekend. If we have a bad Friday, then it's kind of going to be a struggle. And if we have one of those weekends where I know my Friday's bad, I'm looking forward to the race, because I've always been a better racer than I have been a qualifier. We kind of see that in most of my races, where I probably would qualify like 12th, but I'll get up to that front group and be around 5th or 6th. So I always look forward to the race and being aggressive those first few laps, because that's my favorite part is kind of making that, it is a show. You think about it, right? You're making a show. So that's my favorite part for sure.
This is race related as well. So the bikes on your team, I mean, obviously different size weights, but are they basically the same bike, your bike and PJ's bike?
Yeah, there's small things that are a little bit different. Our motors are pretty much all from the same place, but mine, like PJ will obviously be the number 1 because he's fighting for the championship. So whatever they get, their initial package, whether it's like an update from, like let's say an exhaust, an updated exhaust, he'll get that first. Same with like motors, like we got new motors like around Brainerd, so they all got new motors for that. I think I'll be getting my new one for Ohio or Coda, one or the other. So it's relatively the same. Like they try to give us all the same package, but it's slightly different here and there. Yeah. Like all the components are all the same. All the things that we have to run are all the same. Corey has different grips because he's a tall guy, but aside from that, we're all like pretty much identical.
So what's amazing, like what I noticed about your riding, like you could like turn in so late and still hit that apex. Like that one video I was watching it, Carlos Rossi posted up, and he's a good rider, but I'm like, your line is here and his line is always here. Like you turn it so late and still hit that apex. So it's like, I'm like, how are you able to do that?
That was a really hard thing for me, especially coming from the smaller bikes. You can get away with turning in early, so that was a really bad habit for me, and I had to break that this year. And that was really just me riding around with guys that were faster. When I rode around people that were faster, they had to do those lines, because if they didn't, they were just not going to make the corner. And that's kind of what I say now is like, I come into turn 1, and that's a corner for me that it's easy for me to rush. And I say, well, I'm going to turn until I think I can't. And that's what I do. And I usually, 99% of the time, will make the apex. But, as you're building as a newer rider, right, like for me, that's more field-based, and I can do that more naturally because that's the level that I've been riding at for the past few years. But when I build up to it and I put myself in kind of like someone working up their shoes, I think of it more as like, instead of turning in early and running yourself wide, give it that split second and try turning in, and turning in more aggressive and fast, right? Using your counter steering more and helping the bike turn in faster. Because once you can turn in faster and you're finding yourself maybe even, like you come into a corner and you turn in too fast, you're like, oh, well, I can go faster, and now I can turn in really fast and make the apex. So for me, right, coming down into turn 1, I know I can turn the bike fast, so I'm going to wait until the last second to turn the bike in because that'll open up my, my braking zone as well, right? Because I can brake so much deeper, straight up and down, and then really just flick the bike in. So that's all kind of like a trickle-down effect, yeah.
Okay. It's like a special skill. I mean, because your line's like watching everybody, like your line's like way later, and you still hit the apex.
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
it's amazing.
Just her explanation, the way she was showing it, we're going to come up with, we're going to call it the Kayla Twist.
The Kayla Twist.
Turn into twist.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's in my head like, if I try to turn in that late and drop the bike like that fast, I'm gonna lose the front. It's just something in my.
But it's also brake pressure, right? When you increase your lean angle, you're decreasing your brake pressure. So when you're trailing into a corner, like some of the corners we have here, like 6, I'm never braking the same amount as I would into turn 1 or as I would into 3A even, right? Because I know I'm gonna have more lean angle. So for me, it's always that feeling in the front. And finding that, especially on a track like this where you're really front heavy and using the nose of the bike to turn, finding that feeling, and especially that could even be suspension work, right? Like finding that feeling with the front to be confident trailing more into the corner, because that's always helped me. And that's how you also get your direction sometimes, is through the front end. Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you.